I'm calling to order the 119th meeting of the Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration. As we, pursuant to Standing Order 1082, study the impact of irregular crossing of Canada's southern border. It's our third meeting on this study, and thank you to the witnesses for your agreeing to appear before us on quite short notice. In this section, we have two organizations that will be appearing and then three individuals. The three individuals will be sharing 7 minutes of time, just so that if anybody's wondering how that's working, we were able to accede to a request to have three people appear, but that's as one witness. So, on va commencer avec le monsieur Stéphane.
We're going to start with Stephen Reichhold from the Table de concertation des organismes au service des personnes réfugiées et immigrantes, the working group of organizations serving refugees and immigrants. Thank you very much, sir, and we're going to begin with your statements for 7 minutes. Thank you very much for your invitation to appear. My name is Stéphane Reichhold. I am the director of the Table de concertation des organismes au service des personnes réfugiées et immigrantes, which includes 140 organizations in Quebec which work with immigrants and refugees as well as undocumented individuals. I'm just going to give you a bit of an overview because I know you often touch on Quebec in your discussions, and I know that not everyone is familiar with the Quebec system. It works very differently from elsewhere in Canada when it comes to asylum claimants. So, very quickly, I'd like to explain how that works. The system that we've had since the 80s, the first step, once the CBSA or IRCC has judged that the person is admissible, then the Quebec Social Services Agency is responsible for managing temporary housing for everyone who arrives. So very quickly, whether the entry is regular or irregular, that doesn't make a difference. Everyone goes through that same system. So whether these are people who come from Roxham Road or L'École, let's say L'École, they stay there a few hours, they do what they need to do with regard to the security and admissibility services, and then the agency brings them to Montreal in a bus and brings them to one of the 4 temporary housing centers that have been created. One of them at the Y has existed for 30 years, and the other 3 have been created since last summer when arrivals increased. So, families, children sometimes stay there for 2 or 3 weeks in this temporary housing until they get their first social welfare check. This generally lasts, or on average, it lasts 2 weeks. Then when they get their first welfare check, they are referred to one of 12 organizations, 12 NGOs rather, in the Montreal region, who are responsible for finding housing for these people. And they are funded in order to find housing and also to help them get settled. There's a lot of turnover here. As we speak, 800 or 900 people are in temporary housing. And there's turnover. 100 people might leave, 50 more might arrive. So ultimately, we have managed to ensure that these people who are in the temporary housing are in a fairly orderly situation. The system may seem easy, but nonetheless, it's quite complex. But the reason that it works quite well is that there's very close collaboration between all of the actors in the system. The agency, the IRB, Service Canada, IRCC, Red Cross, the City of Montreal, and all the other stakeholders. We all meet every 6 to 8 weeks. Everyone gets together. We sit down and discuss what's working what we need to prepare for. We try to fix any problems, any missing links in the system. There's a lot of flexibility. And this is a system that can adapt to bigger volumes, like Mr. Fortin was saying earlier. Today, there are about 40 or 50 people arriving per day. That's very manageable. But if twice that many were to suddenly arrive, that would also be something we could handle. Now, I don't know how much time is left, but let me quickly say that I'd like to give you a few numbers. Because there aren't that many statistics around on who these people are, their profile, and so on. There are two organizations that have sent me their statistical information. One is called Cassier from Montreal. They have offered services to 1,700 asylum claimants last year. From mainly Haiti, Nigeria, Syria, Niger, and Congo. The educational background of these people, who are like a sample, well, 43% have a university diploma, 27% have a college diploma. So 70% of these people are quite educated. Now, out of the 1,700, 40% were on social welfare. 40% only, whereas the others had a job and had other sources of revenue. Another organization called La Maison d'Haïti, well, they've helped 6,172 asylum claimants with housing and work permits. And out of that 6,172, 2,344 stated that they had found work. So, we would like to have more information on this, but what we're seeing here is that the majority of asylum claimants who have arrived over the last few months are starting to get jobs in Quebec, which is great news. I don't say it's easy. There's a new phenomenon now, which is that various companies in rural areas are recruiting asylum claimants who have arrived in Montreal. So people come in to Montreal, spend the day there, do interviews, and offer work to some of the asylum claimants. We're talking about people from the Mauricie, Chaudière-Appalaches regions, and various other regions. Hundreds or even thousands of asylum claimants have been recruited by firms that take them on, find them housing, sometimes even bring over their families, and who have decided to do this independently. Once again, we don't have enough data. It would be interesting to have more data. There are also many citizen initiatives which have started since last summer. Big companies like Spectra, which puts on the Jazz Festival, the TD Dominion Bank, the Toronto Dominion Bank rather, has put aside a large quantity of money to do activities with children, for example, in temporary housing. And there's also grassroots initiatives and donations. Now, I've described some of the situation. Community organizations show a great deal of creativity, as you know. Centraide is also a major player in terms of funding. The private sector as well, fundraising activities. I think what the biggest obstacle to treating people with dignity is the negative messaging we hear. That's what we fear the most. In fact, we've even heard it around this table. Your time is almost up. Yes, I can answer questions if you need any more information about what happens in Quebec.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to appear before the committee on this important topic. OCASI, Ontario Council of Agencies Serving Immigrants, has 232 member agencies across the province. And much like my friend here, our member agencies assist immigrants and refugee claimants. The number of people making claims historically goes up and down. And currently, we are seeing a higher than usual number of claimants in Ontario, and this is causing a higher than usual draw on services and supports. Ontario also receives refugee claimants who have entered and made a claim in another province. And this is also not new, and it's a trend that's not limited to refugee claimants. The Toronto Shelter Network says that refugee claimants currently make up about 45% of the shelter system. But it's hard to say how they arrived, whether they arrived irregularly or at a port of entry, since I'm told that the shelters don't really ask for that information, and nor is there a need. We should also keep in mind that all refugee claimants don't seek out emergency shelter or services. The shortage of emergency shelter in various municipalities and the shortage of affordable housing is a long-standing need, and it's not caused by refugee claimants. So if there's a crisis, it's the lack of affordable and adequate housing, resulting in bottlenecks in emergency shelters in many municipalities, including Toronto. The backlog at the shelters is partly due to the fact that in the past, refugee claimants would only stay a few weeks and then move out into housing, but now it takes longer. And one estimate from Toronto is about 3 to 6 months, and that is creating a backlog, and that's because there just isn't enough affordable housing. The City of Toronto is working on both a short-term and long-term capacity plan to deal with the refugee housing situation together with community service organizations. And so leaders of local refugee shelters are working alongside city officials to formulate the long-term plan, which, if funded sufficiently, could have a huge impact in dealing with the current challenges. And my colleague Ann Wolger can elaborate on that situation. But it should also be noted that not all claimants seek shelter. Claimants are not eligible for all services, unlike other immigrants or refugees, and our member agencies continue to do some terrific work, as they've done for many years, to find the resources and collaborations to deliver services claimants need. Historically, all levels of government, federal, provincial, and municipal, have worked well together with community service organizations to welcome and support refugee claimants and other newcomers. And so it's important that collaboration continues, so there's a plan, and that services are harmonized across regions and across all governments, and all governments continue to benefit from the contributions that refugee claimants make. And finally, like my colleague, we are concerned about the growing anti-refugee sentiment. And it's important for us that our leaders and media are careful not to use inflammatory or alarmist language with respect to refugee claimants. I'll end there and look forward to your questions.
Very good. Thank you very much. For the other three, begin with Ms. Wolger. Nice to see you again.
Okay. My name is Ann Wolger, and I'm the founder of Matthew House Toronto, a group of homes that welcomes, shelters, and supports refugee claimants. For the past 30 years, working individually and with dedicated staff and volunteers, I've helped with the resettlement of close to 4,000 refugees. During those years, many painful stories drove me to tears as refugees told me of loved ones killed before their eyes, of being gang raped, of receiving death threats against them and their children. I've seen torture marks and scars on people's bodies, like the African woman who showed me bullet wounds that grazed her stomach before they killed her husband and son. Hence, when I hear media reports portraying these same people as illegal, bogus, and queue jumpers, it both angers me and breaks my heart. As a nation, we must respect our international obligations, where those fleeing for their lives may enter without hindrance. Our refugee status determination system is second to none, assessing each case fairly and ensuring protection for those who need it. And I can also attest that in spite of all their hardship, refugee claimants are highly motivated, resilient people who are often well-educated and entrepreneurial, eager to give back to the country that welcomed and protected them. I could share hundreds of success stories of refugee claimants, One is that of Ben from Afghanistan, who came alone to Canada 3 years ago at the age of 16. Last month, not only did he graduate from his high school with top honors, he was voted class valedictorian. During his valedictory address, he shared his story of fleeing for his life and described the moment he set foot on Canadian soil as being exciting yet terrifying. Thankfully, he has been granted refugee protection. He concluded his speech by quoting Martin Luther King, encouraging his classmates to believe in their own dignity, do their very best, and commit themselves to the eternal principles of beauty, love, and justice. Ben is but one example of the kinds of people crossing our border today. I can assure you that in supporting these people with love and justice, the return on investment will be enormous and all of Canada will benefit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Neve, welcome back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Amnesty International certainly welcomes the opportunity to appear as part of this study into irregular crossings of the Canada-US border, a situation that absolutely must be understood from a human rights perspective. We do not agree that the situation along the border constitutes a crisis by any measure. The numbers are well within Canada's capacity and also responsibility to respond to, and certainly do not come close to approaching a sense of crisis when considered in a global context. That said, the numbers are clearly higher than in years past, and there are two primary reasons. First, there has been a rapid deterioration in respect for the rights of refugee claimants, refugees, and migrants in the United States since Donald Trump assumed the presidency. As such, it is not at all surprising that a growing number of refugee claimants in the United States do not feel safe, do not feel confident that their claims for asylum will be dealt with fairly under the U.S. system, and have instead sought to cross into Canada to seek protection. A 2007 federal court ruling documented the many ways that refugee protection in the United States failed to meet the Safe Third Country Agreement's required standards of safety. While that decision was reversed by the Federal Court of Appeal on jurisdictional and other legal grounds, the factual findings about grave problems in the U.S. asylum system remained undisturbed. Today, more than a decade later, those concerns have mounted dramatically. Numerous procedural barriers to making asylum claims, restrictive interpretations of the refugee definition, limits on women advancing gender-based claims, bars on making claims after 1 year, difficulties in obtaining legal counsel, and extensive, arbitrary, lengthy, and abusive immigration detention. Most recently, there is the impact of what has come to be known as the Muslim ban and the refugee ban, toxic rhetoric associated with Donald Trump's intended border wall, and cruel measures targeting children and families for mandatory detention. The second key element, of course, is that the Canada-US Safe Third Country Agreement makes it nearly impossible for refugee claimants in the United States to seek protection at an official Canadian border post. Unless they come within a limited number of exceptions to the agreement, the only way they are able to access the Canadian refugee determination system is to cross the border irregularly and make a claim inside Canada. That has led many individuals to make dangerous journeys into Canada, including in harsh winter conditions. We emphatically stress that these irregular crossings to make refugee claims are not illegal, not under international law, not under Canadian law. This is why Amnesty International has called for the Safe Third Country Agreement to be suspended. When it became clear that the government was not prepared to take that step, we joined with the Canadian Council for Refugees and the Canadian Council of Churches in launching a federal court application last July. Full hearings are set for this coming January, but suspending the Safe Third Country Agreement now would send a strong message that Canada is concerned about the deteriorating regard for the rights of refugees in the United States and is committed to ensuring that the application of the Safe Third Country Agreement is fully consistent with our international human rights obligations. And finally, it would also bring a greater sense of order and oversight to border crossings by encouraging individuals to instead make their claims at official border posts. Thank you.
Very much. You're always able to stretch the time a bit. You've got committee appearances down to an art. Luckily, Okazi took less time, and very delighted. Very all planned. Mr. Mohammed, welcome and good to see you again.
Good afternoon. I'm honored to be here today. As a newcomer to Canada, I would like to begin by recognizing that here in Ottawa, I'm on the traditional territory of Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. I'm here to talk about refugees and immigrants. I'm also here to say thank you to the people of Canada for saving my life from certain death by lynching from the homophobic mobs in Ghana and saving me from imprisonment from Ghanaian police for the crime of homosexuality. So here, perhaps, the hate mongers in Canada may think that I'm a criminal, but it is truly a crime. Is it truly a crime? Is it truly a crime to be my authentic self and embrace my sexual orientation? I'm a person who has experienced how refugees and immigrants are struggling and seeking a better life. I've traveled through 9 countries by plane, bus, boat, and on foot. I've walked through dangerous jungles where I saw dead people who were also trying to make it to a different country where they could be safe. In the middle of the night, my friend died from thirst and hunger right beside me. I was also robbed and attacked by a group of armed men and armed robbers and women. I went to the United States seeking it's a country that protects and keeps refugees safe. I was wrong. I was jailed in detention for 9 months with murderers, drug dealers, and people who committed felony. I was not provided a lawyer for my bond hearing or my asylum hearing at the United States Immigration Court in the detention. The court required me to pay a very high $28,000 bond for me to be conditionally released from detention. My brother had to pay that bond. I was required to report every 2 weeks to an ICE officer who harassed me for documents and constantly threatened me with deportation. I felt very afraid because at that time, the US was deporting people. So like many other refugees, I fled from the US where I was not safe to Canada where I will be safe. On December 24th, 2016, me and my friend Razak Iyal walked for 10 hours in the cold across the border near Emerson, Manitoba. On that fateful night, we both suffered severe frostbite, resulting in the loss of our fingers. We would have lost our life had it not been a good Canadian Samaritan named Franco. He stopped on the side of the road and saved us from the cold and called 911. Many Canadians have helped us and other refugees ever since we came to Canada. I want the people of this great country called Canada to know that refugees and immigrants are not criminals or economic migrants. There is another misconception that refugee protection is granted very easily in Canada. The refugee claim hearing in Canada is not an easy process. An IRB member from Calgary, Alberta, grilled me for over 3 hours and did not give me a decision for another 2 months after the hearing. It was a tough process, and it is still a tough process. Refugees are people who are coming to this country seeking protection and safety. And also we want to live in a home where we can feel safe from homophobic people and mobs. Refugees and immigrants are also here to follow the laws of this country. So we want the Canadian people to please protect us with hope, courage, and tell us you are safe here. I would like to thank the Legal Aid Manitoba for giving me a free counsel, Mr. Bashir Khan, a really good Winnipeg refugee lawyer who visited me in the hospital many times, sat beside my bed, and completed my refugee application. He always visited me at my residence and worked very hard to prepare me for my refugee claim hearing. I'm very, very grateful to the Canadian healthcare system for what they did for me and my friend. Without them, I wouldn't be here now. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Mendez.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Thank you very much, Mr. Mohammed. It's always hard to hear stories like yours, but I'm glad you were in Canada. Je vais vous poser des questions à vous, Monsieur Reichhold, parce que
I have some questions for Mr. Reichhold because we've known each other for a long time. We worked together for various years. At the time, I was the director of an organization that provided services to immigrants and refugees, and a member of your organization as well. So it was interesting to hear what you had to say about the mechanisms that were created in Quebec and that worked pretty well with trial and error. Of course, we've made things work pretty well. And today I think that the Quebec system is able to adjust to an increase or decrease in the number of claimants who call upon our qualities of compassion and openness. So, since we've fought some of those battles together, I'd like to go back to the very beginning of what we did together in the 80s and 90s. In Quebec at the time, we started seeing the beginning of the waves of arrivals from Romania in containers, and we've all heard the horror stories from that time. So your organization knew that it was necessary to have a concerted action from all levels of government, because there was a role to play for the federal government, but the provincial government had a role as well when it comes to services. So could you tell us more about that? It has been quite a while, but the situation that we're seeing in 2017 is not new. We saw that in 2011. We saw that prior to that. There have been many waves of arrivals. And people tend to forget that most people who arrived, most of them stayed and have become very well integrated. And that will doubtless be the case this time as well. So, in my opinion, to use the word crisis is the opposite of the truth, because we are not in a crisis. Yes, there are pressures. I think that the recipe, maybe it's not magic, but I think in Quebec, the method that we use that works quite well is that at a regional level, there's a really good level of collaboration between the various levels of government, specifically between the Quebec Immigration Ministry and Citizenship Canada, as well as the agency, the City of Montreal, that now has an office for new arrivals. We communicate with all of these stakeholders almost on a daily basis, and we offer each other mutual support. The flow of information between all of us works really well. Communication is excellent. There are challenges, but when these arise, the first thing we do is to all get together and decide who's going to deal with what challenge, using what resources. It may seem a little naive, but actually it works well. We have a joint committee with NGOs, Citizenship Canada, in Montreal at the regional level, and that committee has existed for 27 years. In fact, it's the very same committee. It's still alive. It continues to meet every 3 months. We have weathered so many crises together. I think that's the solution. And I would propose to my Ontario colleagues to adopt that system of communication.
I wanted to ask you, do you have the same kind of collaboration in Ontario with the different levels of government? I almost know the answer, but I just want to have it there for the record, because it has worked very well in Quebec, and just having been there, knowing how it works. I certainly believe it could be something we could share with other provinces.
The Quebec model sounds very intriguing. We don't have something similar in Ontario, no. But I guess I should also say that the Quebec government's relationship with the federal government with respect to immigration is very different and unique in Canada compared to what other provinces and territories have. That's all I can say.
But are you talking about in terms of jurisdiction?
Well, also how the services are funded in Quebec, the transfer payments work differently. I mean, I should probably let Stéphane explain that. For example, the Canada-Ontario Immigration Agreement is administered very different. The relationship between Ontario and the federal government is very different when it comes to funding settlement services, for example. But even in terms of collaboration around planning, it's a very different relationship that Ontario has. We don't have the same model.
Would you have something to add to that, Ms. Wolger? Because you do provide emergency shelter to...
I would agree that we don't have the same model as Montreal. In fact, we were speaking the other day, and I was also feeling a bit envious. I think it's something that we could aspire to, and I would love to do that. Yeah, there's always been a not direct support, particularly for refugee claimant shelter. In Ontario from any level of government except the municipal government, which is just a matter of homelessness. It's our homeless category. And unfortunately, there's just not enough decent and appropriate shelters specifically for refugee claimants, which is actually why I became the founder of Matthew House, which is a private charity, because there is that kind of need. I'm feeling encouraged, I must say. And I know everyone seems kind of depressed right now, but I'm feeling encouraged that actually, from my perspective, I've sometimes felt like a voice crying in the wilderness, and I'm feeling like, oh, all the different levels of government are sort of waking up and realizing, hey, these people actually, maybe they would benefit from our support with shelter and housing, because in the long run, everyone benefits. Refugee claimants are such wonderful contributors to society, and so everyone wins. And so the better we work together, I see this as a huge opportunity, actually.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mendez. I don't think we're depressed. I think what we are reflecting on is the great privilege that it is to be members of Parliament and to hear stories both from a refugee claimant but also from those who are working to make our country better. So I think that's what you're hearing, not depression, maybe a little bit of calmness. Ms. Rempel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to express my thanks to all of you for the work that you do to protect the world's most vulnerable. Just by way of sharing a story, it's actually 2 summers ago. We were sitting in committee in the middle of the summer with Immigration Committee. This seems to be a trend. The reason why was because shortly after the last federal election, when I was appointed as opposition minister or shadow minister for citizenship and immigration, I had a man come and meet with me. And what he said in my office changed my life, because he told me about some of his relatives that had been in captivity and been forced to eat their children that were boiled in front of them. And he was a member of the Yazidi community. And then about 2 weeks later, I had the opportunity to meet with Nadia Murad, who was not really well known to the world yet. And I have never sat with someone before who had been through that type of trauma. And I just remember I just remember feeling, even just talking about it, this sense of just we needed to do something. Anger, disgust, but we needed to do something. And we had meetings during the summer. We pushed a motion through in the House of Commons, and then from there, this committee we pushed subsequent studies to, and I pushed a subsequent study because I knew that these women weren't getting adequate support when they came to Canada, that they had experienced extreme trauma, and so much as a condemnation, but an opportunity for us to change our processes to get this right. And, I'm very proud of that work because it reflects the fact that even in one of the special things about Canada is that we're not discussing if immigration, we're discussing how. And I fully believe that we have a responsibility to protect the world's most vulnerable, and an important one. I think that Canada also has a role to be an advocate for change that instills those concepts to improve global asylum processes. When I criticize the United Nations, it's because I don't understand why those women were not in the UN selection process. Right? Our committee was just in Uganda, and we met with members of the LGBT community, and there's not one person who's here who wasn't deeply affected by that meeting. And this is why we moved a motion in the House of Commons to extend the Rainbow Wrap program and make it permanent. Right? I think it's about how. And to me, where I would like to see this debate go is really ask how. Now, Ms. Woolger, the comment that you just made, that you were encouraged about basically seeing support for long-term integration, because that when we invest in the integration of humanitarian immigrants, they have a better experience in Canada and their potential is unlocked. And I am the first person who will admit somebody who is coming to Canada, who has has escaped persecution, they have trauma to overcome, they're in a new country. So they have challenges to overcome before we can even start talking about English language training or French language training. Pardon, I'm from Alberta, and to me that is where we've kind of lost the dialogue in the last 18 months, and that is my concern. So when we're asking questions about how are we going to pay for this, it's not out of a pejorative place. It's a place that we can't lose. We can't lose the narrative. We can't just say that our obligation ends when somebody crosses the border. And this is why we have to ask how. And, we had meetings in Uganda with very senior officials from the government. And I was very struck by hearing, look, the government of Uganda said we don't expect the world to resettle everybody that's here. And you can't. So the question is how, and what do you do, and how do we intervene with aid? And for me, where we've lost the narrative is I cannot accept that we have 800 people in college dormitories with no plan to house them. And I can't accept that we don't have some sort of projection or plan on the needs that people have. And I can't accept that we're not talking about how to budget this. I can't accept as a parliamentarian that I can't scrutinize budgetary figures because we're treating this as a piecemeal solution, because that is not compassionate. And so, what's been very, very, very disappointing to me is, as somebody who has advocated for refugees and the world's most vulnerable in this country, is to watch this debate go into one about, do you know what it's like to read articles about yourself being called racist after I've done this for the last 2 years? It's not about me. But I don't want the debate to go there. I want the debate to go back to how. And we've lost that narrative, and that's why we called these meetings this summer. So, this is why I would like to see a report come out of this study. And we might disagree on how, but we can't shy away from that debate. We can't shy away from looking at, okay, Article 31 of the Refugee Convention. When it was put in place, France wanted to make sure that there wasn't the capacity for asylum claim shopping. Does that still apply in today's global context? I would argue yes, but under what circumstances? Are the review criteria for the Safe Third Country Agreement still valid? The government argues yes, others will argue no, but we're not even having that discussion right now. It's just nothing, and then there's 800 people that I don't know where they're going to go in a week. And sadly, after 6 hours of meetings, I don't feel any more enlightened, but I would encourage my colleagues, especially after hearing the testimony that we had here, that we would get back to the how. So I will ask a very simple question of you at the end of my time. We might disagree on how, but would you feel after your testimony and after what's happening here today, if it would be useful if this committee presents a report with recommendations tables a report with the House of Commons, and asks the government for an official response.
You have 10 seconds to all respond.
Oh, you're so cruel.
That's your 7 minutes.
Well, I,
That's 7 minutes. Ms. Kwan?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I want to thank you with us today. In particular, I just want to highlight Mr. Mohammed for your bravery, the fact that you made the journey to get to safety, because your life matters and it should be valued. And I'm so glad that Canada valued your life in granting your asylum claim. Now, what we've heard, of course, is that, and what I know in my heart, is that you didn't have to go through the risks that you took in crossing over from Manitoba to Canada, from the United States to Manitoba. That you didn't have to risk losing the digits of your fingers, right? If we actually suspended the Safe Third Country Agreement, you might have actually crossed over at an official point of entry and therefore not risk your life and see your friend and others go through the same experience. So from that perspective, that's why I'm calling for the suspension of the Safe Third Country Agreement. Would you, as somebody who's experienced this journey yourself, call on government, the Canadian government, to suspend the Safe Third Country Agreement?
Yeah, I would like it to be done because, like the way you said, it wasn't safe for we the immigrants, because if it was safe, we can go through the border and ask for to seek for asylum there, and the process will start from there. But we didn't the way the agreement went. That's why we sneak in and come in, because we don't want to go through the border for them to take us back to the United States, which we are very afraid of. And walking through that, making that journey was very, very hard, because we couldn't have imagined, we didn't know we were going to survive in that kind of journey, because for 10 hours in the cold, at least you're already gone. But to the Third Safe Country Agreement, that's what it causes a lot of damage to most refugees and immigrants. So we would like it to be suspended.
Thank you very much. And we've heard that from Ms. Neve, and I think we've also heard that from Ms. Wogler as well on the suspension of the Safe Third Country Agreement. If I could just get a quick answer in the affirmative.
If I can just say, because I worked 30 years with refugees, half of my career, there was no Safe Third Country Agreement, and I would have to say that things worked so much more smoothly. Everyone just came to the border. It was in everyone's best interest to present themselves in an orderly fashion. They were properly screened. They were properly processed. Nobody would want to go to an irregular point, because why would they? It was safer, more secure. It was just more efficient. It just made much more sense.
Thank you.
If I could just echo that, I mean, I made the case as to why, from a human rights perspective, in Amnesty International's view and many others, it's vital that the agreement be suspended, because by no measure does refugee protection in the United States meet the required standards of the agreement or meet international standards. But I think this other point, that there's also a border management argument to be made as to why suspending the agreement makes sense, to bring back a sense of orderliness and oversight to how refugee claims are handled at the border is in that interest as well.
Thank you. I have two other areas, and I know I'm going to run out of time very quickly. You know, I know some people argue with semantics, using the word illegal versus irregular. From my perspective, it's not semantics, it's what the law says itself, and the law is very specific about it when it says that a person comes through regular or irregular crossings to seek asylum. They are actually doing it per Canadian law in accordance to Section 133 of the Immigration Refugee Protection Act. So if we just heard Ms. Rempel, who made a very moving speech about really wanting to move forward with a plan. With the plan, also incorporate using the right terminology and stop casting the view that asylum seekers are somehow illegal. Is that not an important component of the plan?
Whether it's a plan, whether it's just the statements that government ministers, officials, journalists, any and all of us make, I think it is absolutely incumbent upon all of us to stop using the word illegal to refer to individuals who cross borders to make refugee claims. We see that around the world, and it is a toxic trend that is undermining public support for refugee protection, is creating an undue sense of alarm and hysteria about refugees and the threats they pose, and, as you've highlighted, is completely groundless in law, and we need to banish it from our vocabulary.
Thank you. I'm going to move to about the housing piece, and thank you, Ms. Walkler, for your 30 years of experience and for sharing that piece with us. To say that when we didn't have the Safe Third Country Agreement, actually there was order to border crossings, and maybe we need to get back to that. I also want to talk about the housing piece. Because, you know, we're now talking about doing shelters by way of renting hotels. Would it not make sense for the government to actually invest the millions, tens of millions of dollars in getting a permanent structure or multiple permanent structures to support asylum seekers in this regard? I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Yes, it certainly would. And I guess I just want to say, as shelter leader from Toronto, there's actually a coalition of shelter leaders that have actually been meeting with the City of Toronto, and we've actually put together a long-term refugee capacity plan because of our knowledge of the people and the needs, and the City of Toronto is very open to it, and we see that it truly could be very effective. We're just trusting that there will be funds available.
Well, we heard from the Parliamentary Secretary, Mr. Vaughan, to say that there is, apparently, although he won't tell us how much is being set aside and how much is being offered. But I'm going to call him to task. I hope committee will call him to task to actually fork up that money. And so to that end, your plan that you're working with your colleagues, is that something that you can table for this committee for us to look at?
I think I would have to confirm with the officials at the City of Toronto because we're working on it together. But I would certainly be willing to ask.
That would be very useful, I think, if we can obtain that plan.
Ms. Damoff for 7 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. And I'd like to thank all our witnesses, but in particular, Mr. Mohammed, I want to thank you for being here with us and sharing a story that no doubt is difficult to tell, but it's an important one. And I just want to thank you and also welcome you to Canada. So thank you, though, to all of you for being here. Just a couple of things before. I do have a couple of questions, but we're winding up close to 5 hours now of hearings. And, you know, in terms of a report, the Liberal members of this committee welcomed the opportunity to be here today to listen to testimony. And I think it's important to remember that all of these hearings are public. The Hansard will be, the transcripts will be available. And any report we did wouldn't be tabled till October anyway. So I think, you know, we've welcomed the opportunity to do this. And I also just want to put on the record, and unfortunately Ms. Rempel has left the room, but in terms of the Yazidi women, this government has been committed to bringing Yazidi women here. The previous government brought 3. We've brought 1,000. And those women, when they get to Canada, do indeed require trauma support. And unfortunately, the previous government cut that health care for refugees, and we've reinstated it. So those women do have the opportunity to get the health care and the trauma support that they need. So I just wanted to get that on the record. We've had a lot of talk about why we've seen this surge at the border, and one of the things that's come up repeatedly was a tweet. Mr. Scheer, the Conservative Party leader, said, keep in mind that this started the whole wave when he tweeted out, you know, all are welcome. The new premier in Ontario has said this mess was 100% the result of the federal government. The federal government should foot 100% of the bills. And we've had a minister of the Crown responsible for immigration in Ontario make reference to a tweet. So my question to all of you, actually, is do you think doctoring this photograph to make this photograph into a tweet is in any way whatsoever helpful in the debate that we're having around asylum seekers coming here, to take something like this, which the Conservative Party did, and put out on social media, do you think this is helpful in the debate and what we're seeing in terms of public perception of asylum seekers that are coming to Canada? I'll put it out to any of you.
Me to start. I am aware of the image that you've just shared, and of course there are multiple other images that have circulated in Canada and around the world, which are disparaging and or undermining of refugee protection. And to all of that, we would absolutely say no. There clearly is no place for that kind of messaging or imagery when it comes to refugee protection. I think with sort of all social issues, it is incumbent upon public officials to be very responsible about how they engage in public debate, what images they share, what messages they convey. But there's absolutely no question that when it comes to refugees and refugee claimants, there's an increased vulnerability, there's a real volatility with respect to the public debate, and I think it is incumbent on public officials to go 10 steps further in questioning and second-guessing the imagery and statements that they make. It takes us back to the earlier debate about the use of the word illegal as well, which I do not at all agree is just a matter of semantics. And I think it is unfortunate that a number of officials, including, as was pointed out earlier, our own Minister of Immigration, have used the word illegal at unfortunate times around this debate. And I would love to see a commitment from everyone in public life, no matter what political party they come from, to shy away from that and make an absolute commitment not to do so.
Thank you. Did anyone else want to add to that, or go ahead?
We noticed in a recent Toronto Star poll, and because it is a newspaper, those polls are not exactly reliable. But there was a definite shift from the kind of attitudes that we saw in public from a couple of years ago, when there was so much enthusiasm to sponsor Syrian refugees. And this particular reader poll had 85% of people saying we don't want refugees in Canada, or words to that effect. And that kind of trend is quite alarming for OCASI because of the public education we do in trying to build positive attitudes towards refugees and people's investment in working with refugee communities, make sure they get jobs and housing and that they are part of our communities. So it's particularly unhelpful when this is repeated in media, and then we have to do so much more work to counter not just the language, but also so much misinformation about who is a refugee, why they're fleeing, and why they deserve safety in Canada.
I know in my community in both my ridings, Oakville, North Burlington, so it encompasses both the communities of Oakville and Burlington, and have been very welcoming to refugees, and have really worked to make sure that people have become part of the community, and I feel blessed to be in a community that has welcomed those who are vulnerable and have sought to come to Canada. And you're absolutely right, where there has been a shift because of language and images in how people are perceiving the most vulnerable that are coming to our country. I don't think I've got an awful lot of time yet left. Is our system working? Is it compassionate, and is it organized?
Well, I would like to say that, once again, I think there's a lot of hope for it. And I do want to say that we, certainly in Toronto, appreciate the $11 million that have been sent our way, and are hopeful that there may be more coming that way. So I think it's a good start. And I think, I know in Ontario it is a challenge.
Just as you mentioned Toronto, though, there's been numbers bandied about 45% of people in the housing in Toronto are refugees. But Toronto doesn't track whether it's an asylum seeker or a newcomer or a refugee, do they? So how could you possibly know that it was 45%?
Yeah, there is some challenge, and I'm not with the City of Toronto, so you'll
No,
have to
I know
speak
you're
with them. There is, because of being a sanctuary city,
That's right.
the way that they track people, it's a bit
They've
difficult.
got a don't ask, don't tell policy, do they not?
Yeah,
so it would be
that's-
impossible to know.
It would be. But what I can say,
I'm afraid I need to
sure.
cut you off
I
there.
feel like things go through ebbs and flows, and I feel they're getting better.
Thank you. Mr. McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I too want to welcome all of our witnesses here today as well, and I'm very glad that you've had the opportunity to bring your experiences to us. I guess we've been very astute on our side here talking about the tracking, and my colleague, Ms. Rampel, was talking about that earlier, that we are very compassionate about making sure that there are opportunities for refugees in Canada. I too was on that committee traveling committee in Africa this early June with several of my colleagues here from the committee on both sides of the House, and that was a very good opportunity to see how our system works. I know that all we're saying is we just want to see a plan, a costed plan on how the process is going to work from the government. I think Ms. Damshoff's just made the point that they don't know where they are. They aren't, I mean, it's not, you don't rely on the housing people in Toronto to find out where these people are. You do it through the refugee claimant system that comes into Canada, and then you keep track of the people as to where they are at so that they can go through the proper channels that we have in the system to become legal refugees in this country after they've crossed. There's no doubt about that. I just want to say that anyone that doubts the compassion of anyone here need to talk to me about it, because I have refugees in my own family that have established here in Canada and gone on to be great citizens, and so I have no qualms about speaking out in the, you know, and some of you talked about the quality of the individuals that are coming into the country. There's, you know, many of that's not the big issue. We just need to know what the plan is and where the government's at, and we've had testimony today from three ministers, two ministers so far, and a parliamentary secretary, and about to have testimony from another one, that have not even given us the same kind of definitive plan that we were able to get from the minister in Ontario. She knew how many dollars they were asking for and what the breakdown was, and we haven't even been able to get that out of the federal government. So that's part of why this committee, we asked for it to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here for the summer to do this. One of the things that we learned when I was in Uganda is that there are 1.4 million people, refugees, in Uganda alone, out of 64 million refugees in the world. And we are looking at almost twice the Canadian population. So this isn't about a resettlement process. A lot of those people don't want to leave their home countries. Most of them don't want to leave their home countries. They've been forced to, as we've heard as well. And so I put that out there. Part of our role at that process was to look at the visa application centers and their function and whether or not there's student, workers, or visitors visas. And there's a process that people go through there before they come to Canada as well. So that's just one more benchmark, but that's through the legal process. And so what we're looking at is having a study here that will deal with some of the situations that we're faced with on a day-to-day basis. I appreciate the comments from Mr. Reichhold in regards to how the system works for the corporate sponsorships, the private ones that you were talking about, and also the grassroots groups, because I know people also who have taken it upon themselves in some of my own local communities, church groups, community groups, towns as a fact, and they have actually integrated refugees. I've been there when they've got off the plane with them to take them to their local communities and integrate them with work, get the kids into school, those sorts of things. We've seen situations where there's problems in Quebec with daycares and a number of those areas. And so with getting them into, there's time frames that we need to be dealing with. And so I guess just in closing, I just want to say that I believe we need some kind of a process, and the visa application process is one. That's through normal channels, though. So we need to find a way for the governments to make it compassionate for those who are refugees that come into our country. And I don't think that the process we're going through now is the only answer for being compassionate. It's not to put them into areas where women and children are only going to be housed for a very short time, or to leave them out. And first of all, we were in the cold in the winters to start with. So I think we need to be compassionate in those areas. And that's why I'm asking for a report to go to, out of this committee, to go to Parliament so that the government can respond. And So my colleague ran out of time on that, so I will
I'm
just
afraid
like
you
to
just-
ask
I'm
ask
afraid you
the
just
same
did as
question
well.
If you
We're-
feel that there is that
We're at,
opportunity.
we're at the end of your 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Sorry. I don't believe, it's now 4 o'clock, so I don't believe we have time for another witness. We take a brief moment to suspend, and then we will reconvene the second hour in just a few moments. Order. This is our continuation of our third meeting on the study of the impact of irregular crossing of Canada's southern border. Thank you, ministers, for being with us today. Thank you again, Minister Blair. It's a great baptism by fire as the new minister, and thank you again, Minister Hussain. This is one of several appearances you've had before our committee on this topic, as well as others, so we thank you again for joining us. We're going to begin with your remarks, and you have 7 minutes.
Thank you. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It is always a pleasure to appear at this committee with my parliamentary colleagues. As you know, Mr. Chair, our government remains firmly committed to abiding by Canada's international obligations, honoring our humanitarian commitments, and upholding our laws regarding asylum claims, while at the same time protecting the safety and security of Canadians.
Which guides all our actions on irregular migration. Our 6-pillar plan includes operational preparedness, border integrity, international obligations, cooperation with provinces and municipalities, outreach, and international engagement. Our first pillar is to ensure that we are prepared. Predicting asylum and migration patterns is difficult, which is why we have a national operations plan in place, developed in collaboration with different government agencies, provinces, municipalities, and non-profit organizations, to ensure that we can deal with any surges at any point along the border. Our professional department and security agencies are able to respond to various possible scenarios wherever and whenever they occur. The second pillar of our plan is security and border integrity. We have a clear and vigorous procedure in place to keep our borders secure and Canadians safe. People who cross our borders irregularly are arrested and subjected to a thorough security screening. And let me be very clear on this one. No one leaves a port of entry until that security screening is complete. Third, Canadians expect of us that we will uphold our international obligations, which have been enshrined into our own Canadian laws since the 1970s. Canada respects its legal obligations, and people who are fleeing persecution have a right to claim asylum and a right to due process. Despite what certain colleagues continue to suggest, respecting our legal obligations to asylum claimants, it's not a choice, it's the law. We recognize that it is important to ensure that claims are processed quickly so that those who are found to be in need of Canada's protection get to stay, and those who do not have a legitimate claim for Canada's protection are asked to leave and are promptly removed. This is why we've invested $74 million into the Immigration Refugee Board that decides asylum claims. This funding will allow us to hire 249 new staff at the IRB, including 64 new decision makers. Our fourth pillar in our plan is cooperation with provincial and municipal partners. We continue to work very closely with provinces and municipalities and all our partners on issues such as contingency planning and housing to ensure an orderly process is in place for asylum claimants. For example, Quebec asked us to speed up work permits so that asylum seekers may have minimal pressure, may have minimal impact on provincial social services. And so we listened and cut processing times for asylum seeker work permits from 3 months to 3 weeks. I'm confident, unfortunately, the new Ontario government has so far refused to play its part, but we remain confident that we can still find a way to work together in upholding our laws and meeting our obligations. It's what Canadians expect of us, and I urge my colleagues in Ontario to come back to the table. The fifth pillar of our plan is the intensive outreach campaign directed at impacted communities and populations. Irregular entry is not a shortcut or a free ticket to Canada, and we've delivered that message consistently and extensively, both at home and abroad, with real results. In fact, through members of parliament and consulates and the Canadian Embassy in Washington, we've engaged more than 600 key stakeholders in the past year to counter misinformation, to explain how our asylum and immigration system works, and to warn of the risks associated with irregular entries. Our sixth and final pillar is our international engagement. We've worked very closely with U.S. officials, and our government will continue to engage the U.S. government to prevent the misuse of U.S.-issued visas and to pursue the modernization of the Safe Third Country Agreement. We also continue to work actively with key source countries and transit countries to deter illegal migration. Recently, I traveled to Nigeria, where my counterparts agreed to help facilitate documents for those whose asylum claims have failed. Mr. Chair, at this point, I'd like to address our government's fiscal plan to deal with irregular migration. As you know, Budget 2018 had already pledged $173.2 million to manage the increased number of people seeking asylum in Canada. These resources were taken into account to start the year. Subsequently, on June 1st, the Government of Canada pledged an initial $50 million in additional funds to assist Quebec, Manitoba, and Ontario, the provinces that have borne the majority of the costs associated with housing asylum claimants. Of this amount, $11 million will go directly to the City of Toronto. As you know, the budget cycle is an open, transparent process whereby fellow parliamentarians have the opportunity to review the government's expenditures on an ongoing basis, determine how taxpayer money is being spent, and to vote on our supplementary estimates accordingly. New resource requirements regarding irregular migration will be presented in the government's supplementary estimates. Mr. Chair, with the additional investments in Budget 2018 and the ongoing collaboration with our various partners, we've made significant progress in managing this situation effectively, and we're prepared for any potential future influxes of asylum claimants. With that said, Mr. Chair, I should note that the volume of asylum claimants in Canada crossing the border irregularly has gone down significantly. In June 2018, there were 1,263 irregular border crossings to claim asylum. This is the lowest monthly total recorded since June 2017. It is less than half the number of people who were intercepted in April of this year. So this signals a continued decrease and is a positive development. We recognize that movements of people are difficult to predict, but it is clear that as we implement our plan, it is having an impact. This is also why we will continue to work very closely with all our partners, in particular the City of Toronto, the provinces of Quebec and Manitoba, which are impacted most significantly by this issue. I already spoke about our wish to also work closely with the province of Ontario. Mr. Chair, we've also made significant refinements in our operations to prepare for future influxes of asylum claimants. The stand-up of a dedicated situation center to manage issues horizontally, the development of a national operations plan to make sure we're able to respond to events quickly and efficiently, the introduction of new innovations such as mobile processing units and virtual decision-making models to ensure rapid and nimble responses to any new influxes. Enhanced coordination and cooperation among all our partners, including federal-provincial relations planning, most notably through the Intergovernmental Task Force on Irregular Migration. We've fast-tracked work permit applications from all asylum claimants in order to alleviate the pressure on the social assistance budgets of provincial governments, working to develop a system of triage of asylum claims at the border to enhance our management abilities and to also move them to locations where they can best be housed and find temporary housing. Mr. Chair, I want to be very clear with members of this committee and with Canadians that I'm confident we'll continue to work with all our partners to effectively address this situation. Although it's difficult to predict future flows, as I've indicated, we're working cooperatively and efficiently to deal with what is in front of us now, which is a challenge but not a crisis, and to prepare for any future influxes. In closing, I'd like to commend our frontline personnel at the RCMP, CBSA, as well as IRCC and the IRB for their exemplary work. They have all performed their duties in a professional and highly effective manner to protect public safety, while ensuring that we uphold our humanitarian responsibilities to treat vulnerable people with dignity and respect. Mr. Chair, thank you once again for the opportunity to give, for me to give this overview to members of this committee, and I look forward to answering any questions that my honorable colleagues may have.
Thank you very much, Minister. We'll just have remarks from one minister at this session of the meeting. I also welcome deputy and officials, as well as those from public safety and emergency preparedness who are with us as well, and from the agency. So questions may end up getting directed anywhere out there, but we're going to begin with Mr. Nandasangri for 7 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to both ministers for being here, and of course to Minister Blair as a fellow Scarborough MP. All 5 of our Scarborough MPs are very proud of your role here with our government. I just want to commence, Minister, there's been some confusion as to the use of language with respect to the use of the word illegal. Can you clarify your position on this, please?
Thank you very much, Mr. Nandasangri. It gives me an opportunity to be clear and consistent on this. Any individual crossing our border from the United States between ports of entry is committing an illegal act because they're crossing the border illegally. However, once that person claims asylum, then that charge is stayed pending the determination of their refugee claim. Once someone is on Canadian soil, the charge of crossing irregularly is stayed pending the determination of their asylum claim.
Thank you, Minister. Can you just give us a sense? The opposition, I know throughout the day, the opposition has been trying to predict or ask different officials to predict the number of people that are expected to come here in the next few months, the next few years, also to budget based on this prediction. Can you tell us the practical difficulty in making such a prediction?
We are not the only country that receives asylum claimants. This is a global phenomenon. Canada is not immune to global migration patterns. We are seeing in the world now a record number of people on the move since the Second World War. And again, we're not immune to that. What our government is committed to is to ensure that we enforce Canadian law, but also meet our international obligations to continue to provide asylum to those who seek it, and do so through an independent process that determines who requires asylum and who doesn't. Because of those trends, because of the fluctuations, not just between years, but even within the year, it's difficult to predict with any certainty how many people are going to show up at your border or claim asylum in a given year. Having said that, we are seeing an increase in the number of people claiming asylum to many industrialized countries in the world, and that is why we've developed a national operations plan that has taken in all the lessons we learned from last year to make sure that we're ready for any eventualities. But as I've said, the numbers have decreased over the last number of months, and the trend is downward. But we're ready for any influxes.
Minister Blair, you had a chance to visit Lacolle yesterday, and I believe you've already spoken to both the ministers in Ontario as well as Mayor Tory, I'm sure on a number of occasions with respect to this. Can you advise us, first of all, are you satisfied with the plan we have? And secondly, do you believe that going forward there's a possibility to engage all 3 levels of government towards a workable plan that will support all those who come here, but as well as Canadians?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. I think it's not only possible, I think it's absolutely essential that we work together. I think all three orders of government have a shared responsibility to uphold the law, to help this country fulfill its international obligations, and to serve all of our citizens by working collaboratively together. And there are responsibilities that municipalities, the provinces, territories, and the federal government share. And I think we are stronger and more effective when we work together. We have seen excellent cooperation, for example, on these very complicated files in the province of Quebec. And we've had very, very productive discussions just in the past few months with the City of Toronto. And I remain convinced that we can and must work collaboratively with all provinces, territories, with municipalities, all orders of government, so that we might all fulfill our responsibility.
And if I may just add, I believe this year, thus far, 43% of those who've come to Canada have come to Ontario. The number over the last 3 years or so have been around anywhere from 38 to 40%. So the net beneficiary of immigration, including refugees, is that of Ontario. Could you tell us why it's an economic imperative for a place like Ontario to ensure that they support those who are coming in, both as immigrants and as refugees? And secondly, what the economic benefit for the entire country because of this, these people?
That's a very important question. The fact of the matter is our immigration system has always had room for both economic immigration, family class, and also refugees. And in the past, we've seen when Canadians have responded generously to provide protection to those who are seeking protection, those folks have eventually integrated into Canadian society and have become upstanding citizens. If you look at the track record that Canada has with respect to its welcome of Vietnamese boat people, those were people who came to our country seeking protection, and Canadians responded generously, and no one can argue today that the Vietnamese Canadian community is not integrated. They're exemplary citizens who are now in turn giving back and sponsoring other refugees, including Syrian refugees. I think that studies done by not only the Canadian government but also the OECD and others have shown that all immigrants make a contribution to their host community. They fill labor market shortages. They bring skills and an entrepreneurial spirit to the host community. And what we're saying to Ontario is that the issue of irregular migration is a challenge that faces us, and we have an obligation that Canadians expect of us to work together to meet that challenge. And these solutions are easier arrived at when we work together.
Thank you, Minister. And if I may, and Mr. Chair, if you may indulge me, my family came here 35 years ago this year, and as a result of incidents that took place on the evening of July 23rd and onwards for 7 days in Sri Lanka, where thousands of Tamils were killed. And for the record, I'd like to register my profound appreciation to this country and you as Minister acting in that capacity. I want to thank you for allowing myself and thousands of others to come here. And it is a very important moment for me personally. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. Is it Ms. Rampel?
It's not a matter of shopping for the country that you want. It's a matter of escaping the oppression that you face. Minister Blair, would you agree with that statement?
I think that the purpose of seeking refuge is to escape from the threat of death or serious harm. And so those who come seeking refuge and make the claim, I think we have a responsibility in law to make sure that those claims are adjudicated according to due process and thoroughly.
So that statement was made by Deputy Prime Minister John Manley upon the signature of the Safe Third Country Agreement in 2002. And that agreement was signed after Canada was in a very similar situation today. It was designed to prevent people from entering Canada and seeking asylum after already reaching the United States. Now, in a scrum today, Minister Goodale was asked if he intended to ask the Americans, because he had asserted that they wouldn't accept people back if we extended the agreement. And he said that he was waiting for the Americans to start the conversation. Was that an official invitation for the American government to start negotiations with yourself and Mr. Goodale, whoever's in charge?
I would presume to interpret Minister Goodale's remarks, but I would invite Minister Hussain, who's been involved in those conversations, to respond if you'd like.
Minister Blair, you are now in charge, and I'm asking you questions. Welcome to committee.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr.
You are
Chair,
in charge
may I
of this,
respond?
Minister Blair. So was that an official extension of an invitation to the United States to enter into negotiations with yourself to close the loophole on the Safe Third Country
I can
Agreement.
advise this committee that I've had the opportunity to speak to both Ministers Goodall and Minister Hussain about conversations that they have had with their counterparts. And although I think it might be better for the committee if the minister was able to speak for himself, I can
I'm
tell you
asking
that it's been
You're in
communicated
charge
to
now.
me.
You're
that
ostensibly in charge. So what
it
do
has
you
been
do?
communicated to me that those conversations have been taking place with our counterparts in the United States, and there is a process. And you cannot unilaterally change an international agreement. We certainly can't do it
Just
by
yes or
changing
no,
a domestic
Minister Blair.
law.
Minister Blair.
But it's a conversation
Mr.
that
Chair,
we have
it is my time.
undertaken and
Mr.
will
Chair.
continue to undertake as appropriate.
Mr. Chair, Minister
Before
Blair.
you continue, I just remind the whole committee that the witnesses may agree to answer a question, they may decline to answer a question, or they may refer to that question to someone else who is a witness at the committee. That is long established as committee procedure. I just remind all the committee members that that is the right of everyone that we invite to be a witness. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Minister Blair, was that an extension of an invitation? Would you extend an invitation to the American government to start a conversation on closing the loophole in the Safe Third Country Agreement?
What I will undertake is to continue to work with Minister Goodall, Minister Hussain, in conversations that they have already undertaken and relationships that they have
Thank you.
already established.
This morning, Minister Blair, or the parliamentary secretary to ESDC, suggested that the, quote, triage system was designed to, quote, redistribute the problem. How many people will be redistributed from Quebec after entering at Roxham Road to Ontario shelters in the next 18 months?
I can tell you that my understanding of the triage system is to ensure that refugee claimants during
many
the period
people would be
have the
triaged?
opportunity to be placed in a place where they are most likely to be successful, a safe place, and so that the burden
Minister
that
Blair,
it may
how many
impact
people
on
will be
communities.
triaged? Because your parliamentary secretary also said that further installments were going to be allocated. He couldn't tell us how much or how many because he said that immigration was in charge there, but now you're in charge. And your counterpart sitting beside you has rightly noted that parliamentarians have the right to scrutinize expenses. So we have found out today that there are going to be future installments, but we don't know for how many people or for what purpose or under what circumstances. How many people are you planning to house in hotels over the next 18 months who have crossed at Roxham Road?
Well, and Mr. Chair, if I may, I'd like to refer that question to the officials who would have a far more accurate answer.
Chair, the triage concept that we're currently designing would see us triage 100% of the arrivals.
How many?
100%
How
of the
many?
arrivals.
How many quantifiably, precisely, how many people are you planning to put in hotels after they've crossed at Roxham Road in the next 18 months?
Sorry, I was answering the first question.
The question was, how could we know this? We need to have a plan at this point in time. You've got 800 people that are about to be moved out of shelters to parts unknown. You need to know. You have made a policy decision not to close the loophole in the Safe Third Country Agreement, and we need to know if you are adequately budgeting for the integration. The entire pillar that you've outlined here on working with the provinces talks nothing about the long-term integration costs of people who are humanitarian immigrations. And you've forgotten the opposite side of the coin. You've forgotten that it's not just about processing them at Roxham Road or taking a picture with them. You have to figure out how you're going to pay for their needs. So, Minister Blair, how many people are you anticipating that you will have to put in a hotel in the next 18 months?
Mr. Hussain?
Mr. Chair, the plan that we have in place is not a new plan. It's been in place
How many
for
people are you planning to put in a hotel, Minister?
Mr. Chair, if I may be
No,
able to
I need to
actually
know
give
this.
an
We have
answer.
gone through hours of meetings with you, and I still don't understand how many people are coming through and how you're planning
Just
to pay
remind
for them.
the member that a question is normally placed through the chair, and if you'd like to do that, that would be helpful.
Point of order, Mr. Chair, on decorum. You raised the right of the minister to answer questions or not. This is the umpteenth committee meeting that we have had. We have 800 people that are about to be evicted from a shelter or college dormitories in Ontario. And I've had 3 ministers plus a new minister who doesn't know what his job is, countless department officials, supplementary estimates, the budgetary process, committee of the whole, order paper questions, and we still don't know how many people they are projecting to come in and how they are budgeting for these expenses. And that is not compassionate because we are in situations where they're having to, outside of the supplementary estimate process, piecemeal money to put people in hotels. We're not talking about how we're going to put together an integration plan for language training. I am just, at this point in time, on decorum, I cannot believe that we have ministers in front of this committee again with no numbers on projections, and they have to have this to the parliamentary budget officer by Thursday. So I'll ask my question again.
I'm just going to say that this is not a point of order. It moved into debate. Is there a point of order over here?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to...
I don't believe it was a point of order. I believe it was continued debate. Ms. Rempel?
Minister Blair. Minister Blair. No, I'm asking a question. I will ask you a question. Do you plan to comply with the parliamentary budget officer's request?
Mr. Chair, you've already indicated that questions need to be directed through you. And I believe the last intervention indicated that that question was directly asked.
Let me rephrase that. Mr. Chair, this is my time, and I will ask a question of the minister. So through you, Mr. Chair, will the minister comply with the parliamentary budget officer's request to provide projections on the amount of people they anticipate coming through the border in the next 18 months by Thursday? And the request is for 5 years. And if that is due on Thursday, why don't they have it here after we approved a $22,000 budget for the study, which the government members are unwilling to provide a report for?
Mr. Chair, I can advise you that this financial data has been compiled, and it will be provided to the parliamentary budget officer in the coming days as required.
Why hasn't this been provided to our committee for review? Why hasn't this been provided to the Ontario provincial government? Why is it secrecy and no plan?
Again, the member asked
if it's been compiled, will the minister table it to committee by the end of the day?
Thank you, Ms. Rempel. Thank you, Minister. Ms. Kwan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and welcome to all the witnesses, including the two ministers. I want to get back to this one point with Minister Hassan. The word illegal versus irregular. I think it is a very central point. We just heard from a number of expert witnesses about the importance of using the right terminology, and that when you call, when people call asylum seekers illegals, they're dehumanizing them and dehumanizing their dignity, and it also has other repercussions as well. At committee, Minister, on March the 19th, you agree that you would use those words interchangeably, illegal and irregular. I believe is wrong. And today, I just heard you also say, at one point in your statement, refer to migrants as illegal migrants. And I just can't tell you how disturbed I am about that, Minister. We also had Minister MacLeod, who appeared before us, and she actually said that she is using the word illegal because she took a page off of you. And that's why she's using that. So once and for all, can we move forward with the right terminology? You are the immigration minister. Under IRPA, the Immigration Refugee Protection Act, it states clearly under Section 133 that asylum seekers who cross over directly or indirectly, they are actually not committing an offense. So will you please use the right terminology and say clearly on the public record that it is wrong for immigration purposes to say asylum seekers who are crossing over irregularly that they are illegals?
I never said that asylum seekers are illegal. That's language that's being used by the government of Ontario. I haven't used that language.
Well, actually, you did. If you go back to read Hansard from committee on March 11th, you were asked that specific question.
I was referring to the act of crossing the border. I wasn't referring to the asylum seekers themselves. There's a distinction there.
So you're saying that for CBSA, the act of crossing the border is illegal, but then once they cross over and they make it clear to say that they're seeking asylum, they're not committing a criminal offense.
Correct.
Will you say that?
Well, I've said it in my statement.
So then let me ask you this. In your statement, you also said, and I quote, charges are stayed pending asylum claim. What charges?
The charge of crossing the border irregularly.
Asylum seekers, when they cross over seeking asylum at irregular border crossings, are not charged. their asylum claim is pending the IRB determination. Do you not know that, Minister?
I do know that.
Then why would you say that charges are pending
No,
the asylum claim? When you make these comments, Minister, when you make these comments, you are conflating the issue. You are stripping asylum seekers their dignity. You are dehumanizing them. You are implying that somehow they're acting in an illegal manner, and it does not help this conversation. It does not help this approach.
Okay, will you give me an opportunity to clear the air? I have not done that. In fact, I've gone out of my way to make sure that I defend the right of people to claim asylum in Canada. I've defended their humanity, and I have fought back against those who would seek to dehumanize them and
Minister,
delegitimize them.
that is not really the case. If you're honest with yourself and you go back and look at Hansard over time and again, the comments that you have made, and you have used the word illegal and irregular interchangeably to the detriment of the asylum seekers. Now, I want to turn to another issue.
Okay.
On the Safe Third Country Agreement, we just heard the story of Mr. Sadu Mohammed, who had to cross over. He risked life and limb to do so. He had other people who cross over irregularly as well. And he's called for the government to suspend the Safe Third Country Agreement, someone who's lived that journey today. Is that something that you will consider doing?
First of all, I'd like to begin by acknowledging and sympathizing with individuals who are seeking asylum, who are fleeing war and persecution.
Minister, I only have 7 minutes, so could you just answer my question quickly?
I'm going to get to the answer. It's important for us to acknowledge the humanity and the dignity of these people. The Safe Third Country Agreement is premised on a principle supported by the United Nations, which is that people should claim asylum in the first safe country that they land in. And according to the analysis of IRCC as well as UNHCR, the United States is a safe country for asylum seekers.
Okay, so you take the point of view that the U.S. is a safe country for inland asylum seekers.
Correct.
All right. The United States has a standing policy where they will not accept any applications for gender-based asylum claimants based on domestic violence and gang violence. That is their standing policy at this point in time. For inland asylum seekers who show up at their border seeking asylum because of domestic violence or gang violence, they will be automatically rejected. Do you think that's safe for the asylum seekers?
So I'll answer your question by stating that we do conduct analysis of the U.S. domestic asylum system. The policy the policy direction that you refer to, we are analyzing the impact of that policy direction on the U.S. domestic asylum system. But as of today, the U.S. asylum system continues to provide due process, it continues to provide appeal rights, and actually has acceptance rates comparable to Canada and many other industrialized countries who accept asylum seekers.
Oh, aside from the fact that the U.S. has standing policy that rejects domestic asylum seekers that are fleeing violence because of domestic violence or gang violence, they also have over 400 children that have been separated from their parents, where their parents have left the U.S., have been deported. So effectively, those children are orphans. That is the current situation. And I don't know how the minister, I am sad to hear you say that.
We've been very clear on that.
I'm sad to hear you say that you consider the U.S. a safe country. Now, on the issue around plans or lack thereof, the government has taken an ad hoc approach to dealing with the situation and is inadequate. So on the question about a plan, will you consider changing the immigration levels plan for the protected persons stream from 16,000 to doubling it so that you can properly accommodate the influx that we're faced with today?
That's a very good question, and in anticipation of the rise in the global migration patterns as well as those seeking asylum, we did proactively as a government raise our protected persons allocation by 4,000. That shows us that we were ready with the plan.
Your number's at 16,000. Will you actually adjust that to reflect current reality today?
Thank you. Moving to Mr. Frederick-Skattles and Ms. Mendez sharing this. Would you like me to tell you at 3.5 minutes, or you manage that?
I think I can manage, but jump in if I can.
No one else has.
Okay, well, then please jump in, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Minister Hussain, for being here, and Minister Blair for coming back, and to the officials again for coming back today. Minister Hussain, my question goes to you. Earlier today, we heard from the Mayor of Chatham, Randy Hope, about how the asylum issue is actually, in his eyes, an opportunity for communities like Chatham. He talked about the demand for labor that exists in the community, labor that doesn't always require previous experience or high levels of education. Today, incidentally, the C.D. Howe Institute put out a briefing note titled "Canada Can Benefit Economically from the Asylum Surge." I think all this is relevant to the discussion. As I say, Mayor Hope sees an opportunity, not a crisis here, but an opportunity in the challenge before us. And what do you say to mayors like him, like Mayor Hope, who lead a community that has been, I'm not sure if you know a lot about the history of Chatham, but it's very close to London, Ontario, and it has always shown a welcoming hand to refugees, going back all the way to the times of the Underground Railroad, accepting many Syrian refugees. And Mayor Hope is quite open to this. And he sees it from a compassionate perspective, but he also, again, sees it from an economic perspective. I know you've talked about many work permits being issued, but if you could center on the whole issue of communities like his who see a real chance here for economic growth and jobs.
Thank you.
Jobs that are not being filled.
Thank you very much for the question. The fact of the matter is this is not a crisis. This is a challenge that is faced by many countries, including Canada, and we remain committed as a government to making sure that we apply Canadian laws and meet our international obligations. The opposition feels that we have to choose between one or the other, but we feel that we can do both, and we have done both. Secondly, we remain committed as a country and as a government to make sure that we don't turn back people who are seeking protection. We don't turn them back to persecution and death and torture, because we have signed international conventions to make sure that we don't do that. And when we have responded as a country and as communities to provide protection to those folks, we have seen the contributions that they've been able to make as new citizens. Now, we also, as part of Canadian law, make sure that those who are not in need of protection are also removed, that protection is only accorded to those who can prove their need for refugee protection. I commend the Mayor of Chatham and other municipal leaders for stepping up to assist these people while they wait for their hearings, to be able to support themselves. The majority of asylum seekers want to work while they wait for their hearings, because they and we don't want folks to be a burden or put pressures on provincial social programs.
Mr. Chair, there's more time?
15 seconds.
15 seconds. I yield it to my friend, Ms. Mendes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair and Peter. Welcome both. Welcome, Mr. Blair, again. I would like to go back to a comment made by the member from Calgary Nose Hill about the budgetary issues around welcoming or facilitating, if you wish, the due process for asylum claimants. The member claims that this would be out of budgetary forecasts that were done. I believe that no, that we always have a margin within our budgets to deal with unplanned cases. It's almost the same issue with the question of housing for the 800 people in Toronto that have to leave dormitories. First of all, I don't think asylum is ever a planned issue for anybody. Nobody plans to seek asylum. They're always forced into that situation. And for a country that is seen by others as a haven and a welcoming country for asylum seekers, well, we can have an idea from year to year that you are going to welcome 15,000, 20,000, more or less. but you can't really put a number or an exact number of how many you're going to receive every day or every week or every month. So you have to keep a certain flexibility and capacity to adjust to whatever needs present themselves at the border in this instance. So would you address the budgetary issue, Minister, if you may, Mr. Hussein, just to reassure our colleagues that this is all within the current budget and that it's not outside of the supplementary?
Absolutely. We've budgeted $173.2 million towards irregular migration. One of the key pieces in that allocation is $74 million to the Immigration Refugee Board, precisely so that claims can be heard faster, so that we can have a much fairer, faster, and final system. That's important because for folks who have a legitimate claim for refugee status, they can find out their decisions faster and then move on with their lives. For those who do not have a legitimate claim for Canada's protection, can also be removed faster. Now, but I think fundamentally what our government disagrees fundamentally with the opposition, and they're beating around the bush on this, is they're not coming out and saying this, but they don't fundamentally believe that we should live up to our international obligations with respect to asylum claimants. These are international obligations that we've signed on and that are now embedded in Canadian law. So providing due process to these people is part of Canadian law. It's not a choice, as you've heard from the provincial minister and others. And so as a country, we are obligated to make sure that if an individual claims asylum, we accord them due process. Having said that, as we move forward, we do have a plan in place based on last year's experience. And that plan is premised on not just further investments in the IRB, but also collaborating with provinces, making sure that asylum seekers are able to support themselves by providing them with work permits so that they are able to work while they wait for their hearings.
Thank you. That's it. But I would like to take the prerogative as chair just to ask one question, and it's not really tongue-in-cheek, but it's on this economic issue, and we are hearing, a need of provinces to have some sharing of the burden and the willingness of the government to do it. Have any of the provinces offered to reimburse the federal government for the costs of refugee processing due to the huge economic advantage they will receive over 10 or 20 years from the likes of people around this table who have been received as refugees?
Mr. Chair, no, that idea hasn't been broached with provinces, but it's a good question.
It wasn't totally in jest. I mean, we think about an economic balance. I'm an accountant. Think about the balance sheet. Mr. Poilievre for 5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Ministre Blair.
Thank you, Ministers. Minister Blair, how many people have crossed the border illegally since your government has been in power?
Vous n'avez pas le chiffre vous-même, vous êtes en charge.
You don't have the number yourself? You have been appointed as the minister responsible for borders. You're in charge. You don't know the numbers? You're not aware of that?
Or I assume these responsibilities, and so I am asking for information from officials. I now have that information in front of me. The asylum claim by type as totaled in 2017 was 50,864, and so far from January 1st to July 10th by 2018, there has been a total of irregular asylum claims of 11,408.
Point of order.
C'est 50 000, vous avez dit, en 2010.
You said 50,000 in 2017?
Illegally, and I'm just wondering. We've had a lot of discussion about illegal versus irregular. That was the question. I'm not sure that was the answer that we got.
Point of order.
If I may then clarify, because on the translation I wasn't picking that up, but let me be very clear then. The irregular refugee claimants, if that was in fact the question. The irregular refugee claimants from January, for 2017, the irregular refugee claimants was 19,002. And so far in 2018, July 1st to July 10th, which precedes my appointment, the irregular migration is 11,408.
Okay.
Excellent. Alors,
Excellent. Minister, that means that 30,000 people, the difference between those two numbers, crossed the border illegally, the border between the United States and Canada, since your government came to power? Earlier today, you stated that during your visit to Lacolle, what you saw there was an orderly process. Do you believe that 30,000 people crossing the border illegally is something that can be described by the word orderly?
What I was referring to was the processing of irregular refugee claimants, asylum seekers that have entered the country. I had the opportunity at Lacolle to witness a very professional and seamless process conducted by the RCMP, CBSA, and IRCC, in all of those agencies working well and collaboratively together. I saw an excellent effort on behalf, for example, of the RCMP to conduct investigations to ensure that there is no criminality or risk to the security of Canada, and they were doing an excellent job. And then a very orderly transition then into the hands of CBSA and then the IRCC.
Mais vous décrivez comme ordonné quelque chose que votre gouvernement...
We're describing as orderly something that your government has already called illegal. Your government, according to the Prime Minister, or to the Minister's words, said that crossing the border in this manner is illegal. I find it difficult to reconcile these two concepts. On the one hand, illegal, and on the other hand, orderly. And I think 70% of Canadians believe that your government don't have a plan. Earlier today, Ms. Rempel asked you a question. She asked, what agencies report directly to you as a minister? You did not have an answer to that question. You've had a chance to consider the question in the hours that have passed since then. Can you now tell us what agencies will report directly to you as a minister?
No agencies report directly to me. I am working on this issue, working very collaboratively with my colleagues across a number of ministries, including the Minister of Immigration.
CBSA doesn't report to you?
It does not.
And RCMP does not report to you?
No, it does not.
Okay, so you're responsible for protecting the border, and the border agency doesn't report to you?
Not directly, no.
So it reports to you indirectly?
No, I'm working with the minister to whom it does report, which is the Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Preparedness.
What do you do if the agencies, if the agency responsible for this issue don't report to you? Then what do you do as minister?
I have been given a responsibility to work across a number of different ministries in order to address the challenges that we face in dealing with irregular border crossers on the issue of, for those who are seeking asylum, to ensure that we work collaboratively, not only within our own government, but with the provinces and territories, with municipalities, and with other stakeholders to manage this issue.
If I could just conclude, Mr. Chair, that the fact that none of the relevant agencies actually report to you suggests to Canadians that your appointment was actually more of a political statement rather than a practical fact.
Thank you, Mr. Poilievre. Mr. Whalen, for 5 minutes.
This is a great place for me to start because earlier in the day a question was asked, and it was sort of asked again of Mr. Blair, Minister Blair now, what his role is, and he comes with an incredible wealth of experience in intergovernmental relations. He's come off a huge file in helping shepherd the cannabis legislation through both houses of our parliament, which was a huge endeavor. And so if you could just, explain for the committee what you are bringing to the table, what expertise you have to further reassure Canadians that we're bolstering our team and this is an important for the Government of Canada to get right.
Thank you very much, Mr. Whalen, and thank you for your kind words. I have, frankly, 4 decades of experience and 10 as a chief of police in a large metropolitan center. I've had the opportunity over the course of that career, and certainly, as you've already indicated, in managing a rather complex file. The cannabis legislation, just as an example, was legislation that had an impact on multiple ministries. I answered directly in that role to the Minister of Justice, Minister of Health, and the Minister of Public Safety, but also had a great deal of involvement with a number of other federal ministries. I worked with senior officials and the governments of all of the provinces and territories and with municipalities across the country, as well as engaging with First Nations and other Indigenous communities. And because of the complexity of this file, there are a number of files which are managed within the government where it was felt that I could be of some assistance to the ministers in continuing to work and improve some of those processes to ensure that cross-ministry collaboration on these important issues. And I think it, and perhaps most importantly, because these issues are important to Canadians. The issues that I have been tasked with respect to border security, the irregular asylum seeking, the irregular crossers who are seeking asylum, issues around organized crime and gun violence are all issues of concern to Canadians that have frankly, an impact on many
look
ministries.
Forward to your contributions, and of course, I think the opposition looks forward to your mandate letter, which I'm sure will be out soon. Before I give the last word to the minister, I just want to thank the witnesses for coming today to help combat some of the misinformation and help reassure Canadians that the situation is well managed. It's secure, and that we're meeting both our legal and our international obligations. I think that was clear from all the testimony today. I would also like to thank the guest members who joined the Liberal team today for their expertise on security, communities and housing, the issues in Quebec, and also international human rights. I think we needed to bolster our team today to make sure we took full advantage of who was appearing before us. And on the issue as to what report comes out of our study, I think we'll leave those important questions to the regular committee who determines its own agenda when we meet in the fall. We have now had 9 great meetings on this very important topic, and in each case it seemed that the department has been a couple of steps ahead of where some of the recommendations were coming from this committee anyway. And so in terms of the 6-pillar plan that comes out of the government, and I'm hoping that maybe the minister could provide some final remarks, but maybe focus on a couple of issues that did come out today. One was modernizing the Safe Third Country Agreement. There have been some discussions there about modernizing it, and I'm wondering whether or not the government is opening to modernizing that. And timelines for processing. We heard a suggestion today of 6 months. The U.S. has 180 days for determination as their benchmark and 45 days to hear. I know the IRB is separate from your department, but if there are things that we're working towards in that regard, what the target is, we would love to know. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Whalen. Number one, on the issue of the Safe Third Country Agreement, it's a bilateral agreement, and we are in... We have expressed our viewpoint to the United States. Like any other agreement that's almost a decade and a half old, it requires a second look to see how we can modernize it to take advantage of developments that have been made in technology, but also in information sharing. And how can we benefit from the full spirit of the agreement by harnessing those developments? On the issue of what the government's trying to do, what we're trying to do and that we've effectively done is to make sure that, that we've learned the lessons from last year. We have a national operations plan in place that has been tested on the ground with different players. Second, that we collaborate to make sure that there's an orderly process in place. Third, that asylum seekers have come to Canada in the past. As the opposition tries to suggest, they pretend that this is a new phenomenon. It's not. In 2008, under their watch, we had 30,000 asylum seekers. And so the fact of the matter is we have laws in place to deal with this. Our system is working. At the IRB, we've invested to make sure that there's an additional 64 decision makers and more than 185 staff to further speed up the process in decision making so that Canada can continue to meet its obligations. And you know, despite the rhetoric, despite the fear-mongering by the opposition, we remain committed to making sure that we have a place in our hearts and in our immigration system for those who are seeking protection. And we will not let fear-mongering and divisive politics on this side of the situation deter us from standing up for the rights of asylum seekers to claim asylum. Having said that, we also, it's part of our law to make sure that if you have no claim for asylum in Canada, that you're removed.
Thank you. Thank you, ministers. Thank you to all our officials. And thank you to the staff and the members of the committee. The meeting is adjourned. See you in September.